Hello everybody, it's your boy Jmulls, and today we're going to be talking about Halo Campaign Evolved, the remake to the 2001 game that started it all, Halo Combat Evolved. We're going to talk about what works, we're going to talk about what I don't think works, we're going to talk about nitpicks, and some rather big issues that I have with Campaign Evolved. So let's get into it. Okay, let's start off with what I think works with this remake. First of all, freaking look at it. It is absolutely stunning. There's a reason people have said that it looks like a playable Blur cinematic from Halo 2 Anniversary, because it really does. The beautiful visuals don't just extend to the environment of Alpha Halo. Master Chief himself is looking rather sexy. God, I love that Mark 5 helmet he has on. It looks so dang good. The cutscene direction is another element that looks drastically improved, coming from Halo Infinite's poor attempt at bandwagoning off of God of War's one-shot cutscenes. Two cutscenes in particular, not like we had many, really stood out to me. The initial cutscene of the Silent Cartographer, with Chief in the back of the Pelican, calm and immovable as the Marines got jostled around the back, and then inside the installation as Chief kicks the sphere down the giant Forerunner shaft to gauge its depth. I think it nailed the sense of scale and this feeling that Master Chief should have around him. He should have a swagger around him, where you know that's the guy above everyone else in any scene he's in. And that's you. Get excited. And unlike Anniversary, which was a brightly lit, directionless crapshoot, this has an aura of mystery and grandeur that I think the original so perfectly illustrated. I wouldn't say it's on the same level as the original, but it's closer to the original than Anniversary. Alongside some really stellar aesthetic elements comes new additions to the Combat Evolved sandbox, 9 new weapons to be precise, including the iconic battle rifle, the needle rifle, as well as the energy sword, and they mentioned things like the sentinel beam as well. These are all weapons so far from other Halo entries, but if you know Halo, you'll know that one of the hallmarks of its game design is how the weapons sandbox interacts with both level design as well as the enemy matchups you face. By simply adding new weapons to the CE sandbox, that can have a potential to drastically shake up the feeling of certain encounters, and I like all the weapons they have talked about, and I can see them being a ton of fun here. Getting the sword from the Gold Elite and the Silent Cartographer, for instance, could be exceptionally fun and cool, unless they move the Gold Elite to earlier in the level. When you get it, it could elicit this really cool feeling of knowing you're right near the exit of this giant installation, and the sword is there to give you this last little boost, this shot in the arm, so that you can get into Fohammer's Pelican. It could be really cool. I don't personally see the need for the game to be one-for-one with the original. It will never be one-for-one with the original, because it is somewhat a product of its time. That is not a negative, it's just an element of what makes CE so special to begin with. And if I want the original CE, I'll just go play the old CE. I personally wanted them to expand on the original while keeping that same vibe and the feel of the original Combat Evolved, and I think in that regard, from what we've seen, it's hit or miss, but mostly hits. The amount of blood, or lack of blood, in Anniversary was a big detraction for me. It gave the scenes a sense of carnage that the original managed to have, and I'm glad to see there's a refocus on blood in the Campaign Evolved as well. I will always be in favor of more blood, but I do think they have overall a good amount of it when you look for it during the little bits of gameplay they have revealed so far. It's a rather small element, but what I noticed and appreciated. I really like how enemies reacted and looked when getting lit up by the Warthog fire. Really felt as if they were getting Swiss cheese, and the effect and everything it felt so visceral. I loved it. I also love the idea of extra missions being added to CE as well, especially since we get more Johnson. Not entirely sure how I feel about them being prequel missions specifically though, but I'm not directly opposed to that either. It'll at least keep the same flow and pace of the original campaign, since we're just getting prequel missions, depending upon what actual changes they make to the base missions. I mean, we practically know nothing about the additional missions besides the fact that Chief and Johnson are there and that they're prequels, so it's hard to make an actual judgment, but I'm just glad we're getting 3 new missions though. Another element I do like is the emphasis on skulls for toggleable settings and additional restrictions. Skulls are an iconic part of Halo. Please let us find them in the world and pick them up and be able to bash Covenant with them. And while I don't like things like ADS in the AR or sprint in my Halo, being able to toggle them off with skulls, which they've talked about, makes me believe that the game wasn't redesigned with the idea that you have sprint at all times. So, interesting middle ground to me. Would have just preferred not to have it to begin with, but And the encounters and level design in the remake look very much faithful to the original. I don't want the campaign to be always one-for-one with the original in this regard, but for iconic missions and sections, I don't mind there being little in the way of revisions. And the overall flow of gameplay, while different to the original because of sprint and reticle bloom, as well as ADS for things like the AR and the Needler, still looked rather fun to me. Now let's address the issues that I have with Halo Campaign Evolved. There's a bunch of elements ranging from smaller, more nitpicky things to genuine annoyances and issues that I think they should rectify that may not entirely ruin the experience for me, but these are like meatballs down the middle of the plate. We shouldn't be missing these. Now, I do not expect sprint, weapon bloom, or ADS to change going to launch. For some reason, modern Halo feels like set in its ways when it comes to this. I don't understand it, I don't agree with it, I don't like them in Halo. I'm glad I can turn sprint off with a skull. Those elements aren't going to ruin the game for me per se, it's just it's going to be a lesser product for me because of their inclusion. I do not like them in Halo. Now a big one. The audio design for most of the weapons is trash, especially the important ones like the plasma rifle, the AR, etc. They just sound so tame and crap in comparison to not just the original, but any of the Bungie games. I don't necessarily mind them being different. I don't need them to just use the sound effects from CE again. What I mind is them being bad. It sounds like we're firing like popcorn kernels or something instead of giant rounds of ammunition meant to tear aliens apart. Especially bad is the AR to me. Not only does it sound lame and limp, but it's not the beast mode 60 round behemoth of the original that felt like I was just dumping barrels of ammunition into the opponent. And now we got this whack 32 round one with bloom and ADS, and I just dislike that immensely. I don't care if the role the original AR was supposed to play might end up being filled by other additions to the sandbox. The original AR for CE is iconic, especially in regards to the other Halo games, and in my eyes, my opinion, that should be preserved. It is inexcusable to change that element of the sandbox when it was such a core component of it. I feel especially strongly about this because I absolutely adore this CE AR. I love that 60 round behemoth. I've had numerous jams in my own run-ins with the campaign where because it is 60 rounds, I've managed to scrape by certain elements and certain locations that I had no business living through, but because of that AR, I got around it. It's fun, I enjoy it, I have memories with it. I would want that to be preserved going into a remake, that where one of the main selling points for it is they want to be faithful to the original. Prove that by going back to the 60 round AR. And look, this next one, it might make encounters more interesting, and I get that, but dang dude, I love the fact you could one-shot hunters in CE. It was such a fun element to me that never got old, that one of the biggest, tankiest enemies you'd come across would just crumble if you got around them and popped a precise round or a shotgun into the soft squishy bits. It did make hunters a bit of a joke in the original when you knew what to do, but it was an iconic element of CE again that to me should be preserved because we're trying to remake CE. Again, I don't mind things not being one for one, and again, this isn't a deal breaker for me or anything, because I think the hunters they showed for Campaign Evolved looked really dang cool. Like, you saw the worms actually wiggle around. Oh, it looked cool. But again, it's one of those elements of CE that is absolutely iconic to me, and it's sad to see it go. Next up, this is the big one for me, and it's the one where it's like, at first, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, and I thought people were kind of overreacting. I have played CE countless times, and I'm like, I can kind of see where people are coming from. Then what I did was like, okay, I have seen Campaign Evolved a couple of times now. Let me go back and just do the Silent Cartographer. Yeah, the Forerunner structures, I just prefer them in the original. I think the biggest issue with how they look in Campaign Evolved is that they don't look aged. Let it look aged. Let it look worn down from the passage of time. It adds to the mystique and wonder of discovering a ring world from an ancient civilization that has been trapped at time. It makes it look too new when it's so, like, shiny. Especially with the top of the island, it's, like, overly detailed. Not as bad as Anniversary, mind you, but again, we shouldn't only be striving to be better than the worst remaster I've ever seen. And while I still think Campaign Evolved looks good by itself, it is a remake of one of the most well-renowned and beautiful games, even for not just its time. It still holds up to this day. That's just how strong the art style and overall art direction were for Combat Evolved. There's a style of architecture, if you're not aware, called Brutalist, and especially for Forerunner designs in the Bungie games, it had a massive inspiration for Bungie when it came to designing the Forerunner installation. This is especially true for Combat Evolved, and I think one of the problems they're running into with Halo Studios is that they're throwing those like triangular tall structures for the Forerunners at like every opportunity possible because they view that to be an iconic element and something immediately eye-catchy so that players recognize this as Forerunner. That wasn't really the case back in Combat Evolved. Now, I don't know if I would call the structures in Combat Evolved just concrete because it is a little bit shiny to it, right? Like, especially if you look at it from different angles, there is a bit of a reflection there. But I would say that it looks more akin to concrete in the original than just a shiny piece of metal, which is what it looks like in the remake. Now, why does this matter? I think that's a fair question because especially if you don't really pay attention to Halo stuff all that much, I can understand why it might sound like a bit of a nitpick. I think one of the coolest elements of Halo, though, is the mystery surrounding the Forerunners. Now, we've kind of lost that with the lore with 343. I get that. However, for Combat Evolved, it was still there, and I think even going back to that game, that sense of mystery and intrigue is also still there. And I think Campaign Evolved does retain some of that. It's just the brutalist architecture for the Forerunners. It made diving deeper into the installation feel more like you're navigating an ancient ruin. And I'm not saying this is going to be a one-for-one comparison or anything like that, but kind of imagine like an Indiana Jones adventure down to an ancient Mayan or like Aztec ruin. You know, those big stone structures that have carvings on the wall? It felt something like that when you were going down into these ancient installations that were Forerunner for Halo. And I think by simply replacing what looked like concrete or more like concrete and the brutalist architecture that the Forerunner stuff had in the original with this more modern Forerunner aesthetic and these very shiny reflective surfaces, you remove a bit of that adventure feel and the feeling that you're diving into something that has remained largely untouched for like 100,000 years. It's something that adds to the environment. It's something that adds to the overall feel of the story, especially for a game like Combat Evolved that doesn't necessarily focus so much on like numerous cinematic cutscenes back to back to back to back to back, like an RPG, for instance. A lot of Combat Evolved's storytelling is not just in the cutscenes you get every now and then, not just in the dialogue, it's in the environmental detail that if you decide to stop and smell the roses, you can pick up a lot from that. I think it's one of those examples where it's like, if you have never played or interacted with Combat Evolved before and you look at Campaign Evolved, it probably looks really good because it looks really good. The problem is if you have that comparison, and once you see it, it's very hard to unsee it. I don't think it's like unsalvageable for Campaign Evolved. I just don't think they're going to really redo a lot of these textures. It's possible they will. Again, it's still a work in progress. The game's not out yet. I just find it highly unlikely. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm I'm not opposed to some changes, especially if this is going to be the new look for Halo moving forward. They did mention back when they talked about the move to Unreal Engine a year ago that multiple projects are in development, and I find it really funny how they announced this, and one, people were surprised as if a Combat Evolved remake hasn't been talked about for a long time, and two, people act like a new Halo game isn't also on the way. And I can kind of understand their perspective with, like, if this is the direction of the art for Forerunners they want to have moving forward, if they put out a new game in the not so distant future that has things like Flood and the Forerunner architecture, and it looks so drastically different from Campaign Evolved, some people might find that to be a bit jarring. Sure, I can kind of sympathize with that perspective if that is what they're dealing with. My counter argument, I would argue just use the aesthetic from Combat Evolved for both, because I still think it can look absolutely gorgeous even in Unreal Engine and even with modern graphics. I don't think it's necessarily just a product of its time. Somewhat, sure. Modern games have way more access to higher polygon counts, especially for environmental details, right? And so a large part of the artistic style and direction of games of old was making the environments in the world feel natural with those lower poly counts. Sure, that's absolutely part of it, but still, I think you could make Combat Evolved look amazing with the fidelity they're going for, while still retaining those artistic elements of the original. Having said that, I want the game to look good, and I want it to feel good to play. And I do think that if I was provided this game right now and I played it, I think I would have an enjoyable time with it. Would I prefer it over the original? It's hard to say. We've only seen like a snippet of one level, right? However, normally when it comes to advertising something, you put your best foot forward. And even then, this still has some issues to it. I also do hope that there's other projects in development that aren't far off specifically, because it has been since 2020 with Halo Infinite. And while I love CE, I also want something new and fresh. I love Combat Evolved. It's one of my favorite games, and I think to do a remake and to do it right, theoretically shouldn't be that hard because you have the blueprint. You already have the working formula from the game from 2001. I think one of the biggest problems Anniversary and seemingly also the remake are having is whenever they try to deviate from that established formula, it's like a domino effect where you knock over one, but it keeps knocking over other dominoes even if you didn't intend to knock them over. I don't think I'm down on Campaign Evolved or anything like that. I think it still looks pretty. I still think it looks good, looks pretty fun as well. It's just there's some obvious mess ups that really shouldn't be there. And it's my hope that with this time they have between now and launch, they're able to take fan feedback into account and possibly make adjustments and modifications when needed to make the experience overall better. I want to love Halo again, and I was thoroughly excited when we first saw Campaign Evolved because it looked really dang good and more impressive than what I've seen out of the series for a while. Again, that's not a high bar though. And for Halo, we should have a high bar. And with that, here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with what you want to see the most out of Campaign Evolved and the future of Halo. Are you satisfied with it? Are you upset about Campaign Evolved? And what is it about it that you either love or dislike? I would love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see my full reaction, because I was hype when they announced this, you should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye, everybody. Until we meet again.